that the battery was low.
Hmm.
How are you?
Good, good. So yeah, like everyone else just happened to be busy with their family independently. I was just hitting everyone up like, oh, like my son's birthday or my daughter's birthday, or just
Yeah.
family related. So yeah, I mean this one being short, that's fine. It's whatever.
Yeah.
But I did see the video, the TED Talk with David
Oh,
Deutsch.
by David. By David. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I got the book.
Careful, my man. You'll be joining our little cult following of him soon if you're not careful.
There's a cult.
Just a little one.
I'm down. Yeah,
What did you make of it?
I really like where he's going with it because that's actually what I'm trying to do. Like I have the same goals, if I understand it correctly. He's trying to come up with like a theory for everything. That or just if it's not one theory, it could be five. It's just the most
Yeah,
underlying principles of reality.
yeah. Well, like his first book is called "The Fabric of Reality,"
Yep.
and is that the one you have, or did you download the beginning of Infinity?
No, I downloaded Fabric of Reality.
Okay, yeah. So that's the one where he lays out like his four strands. So he lays out his ideas for what the four most fundamental theories that we have are, and
Mm-hmm.
how they like relate to each other and stuff. So he has his theory of Darwinism, you know, the theory of computation, which
Okay.
is so the Darwin is the theory of Darwinism that he actually lays out is not Charles Darwin, it's Richard Dawkins
Okay.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
his selfish gene idea. And then the other strands are Alan Turing's conception of computation, and then Hugh Everett's interpretation of quantum mechanics is the third strand, and
Mm-hmm.
then the fourth one is Karl Popper's theory of epistemology, his theory of knowledge.
Ooh. Yeah. 'Cause he did
Uh,
mention that I think in the video as well.
yeah, he mentioned it really, really briefly. Yeah, like there's some great stuff, like on YouTube and that. Like there's one channel in particular, like Brett Hall. He does a pretty good job of explaining um, some of David's ideas. David was also on Sam Harris's podcast
Yeah.
twice. And Sam actually points something out, which I think is very, very true about him. The problem with David is that um, he has a talent for squeezing very big ideas into simple language. But the problem is then that a lot of the time, some of the stuff that he's saying can just like go right over your head, you know. So he can say something which, if it's actually true, is like totally revolutionary. We don't know if it's true or whatever, but let's just say hypothetically, if it was, it's a completely revolutionary thing that he's just said. But like he's expressed it in this totally normal sounding language, so it doesn't really register with you that he's saying something so fucking nuts. Well, not
Yeah.
nuts, but like it's like you'll hear if you I think that podcast with Sam is a great introduction, because Sam really tries like throughout the whole conversation to like hold up like and go, whoa, hang on a second, David.
Yeah. Sam does
Let,
do that.
we need to unpack everything you just said there, because you said a lot,
So is it because we let's say he says a sentence and it goes over our head? Is it because we don't take that sentence literally? We just accept the connotation? Or is it because we do take it literally, but we don't understand the magnitude and the depth and the
yeah, it's
implications?
the magnitude, the depth, the implications, like it all comes from his like epistemology. Like so he follows Karl Popper's notion theory of epistemology. Like he's pretty much identical. Like So have you heard Jordan? Did you watch the talks between Jordan and Sam? Did you watch any of those?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
hurt.
yeah. That stuff hurts, right? It was really, yeah. I was at the one that was in Ireland. I was at the one in Dublin.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. But like, so you've heard them disagree about this, like, can you derive, values from facts and all this stuff? Like that
That
was what.
and truth. And I think they started to get on the same page with each other's definition of truth. But I
Mhm.
think Brett is the one when Jordan went on Rogan and kind of helped Jordan articulate his version of truth. I think he did a good job of that.
You see, so this is the thing. Like Brett's notion of truth is is okay. It's fine. Like
Okay.
like well, as in like it makes sense. What I mean there is that it actually makes sense, right?
No, yeah,
But I
yeah.
think people are way too. I think people are too charitable in saying that what Jordan is saying is just kind of like something similar. Like you can listen. I think it was one of the first times I think Brett was on stage with Jordan, and you can actually hear them. They disagree quite a lot. Like, because like what Brett is saying is very different to what
So
Jordan.
can you like remind me? Because
Well,
here's
like, yeah, like it's been a while since I listened to it, but like, Brett essentially just says, that it's possible to be wrong about something in a useful way,
exactly
you know,
heuristics.
and yeah, and that, if you wanted to, you could kind of call that a kind of truth,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that there's something kind of in a utility sense being something true in a kind of utility sense that's being captured by your wrong idea. Like so the example I think that Brett uses is it fucking porcupines or
yeah.
something?
That's it.
Yeah, it's like what is it again?
So
Can you remind me? I
basically,
can't.
it went like imagine you have two groups. Group A has a realistic view of porcupines. Be careful, but you can be
Yeah,
within 6 feet and you'll live.
yeah,
Group B says, even if you're within 6 feet, man, you might die. So what happens is Group B will be less likely to be hurt by the porcupine. So there's like, speaking very loosely, there's a Darwinian advantage to that. And let's
yeah,
say they might survive longer than Group A. Even though
yeah,
it's not true, it's pragmatic, it's functional.
yeah. So that's fine, and I don't really care if someone wants to call that true or something and then just call the other stuff some other kind of truth. Like that's fine with me. I don't really mind what people call stuff. The thing about what Jordan is doing though is like Jordan takes his thing from like this guy called like William James, like that's where he's getting a lot of his notions of truth and things. And like James was, as far as I know, I wouldn't be the most like James was a pretty fucking devout Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and like we'll say like you might accuse him of a bit of motivated reasoning in bits and places, but basically Jordan's notion is like the moral relativists are wrong. Morals really are like objective. They're real. We can objectively say when something is right and wrong, but we don't seem to be. But Jordan sits there and goes, "Well, we that might be the case, but we can't get our values from our facts." Whereas Sam goes, "Yes, we can." So they're
Yeah, yeah.
both essentially starting from the point of view of the relativists really wrong. Don't like those people. They're gonna fucking uh, uh, lead us down a dark road. So they're both saying morals are objective. But the difference is that Jordan goes, there's no way to bridge the is ought thing. You can't
Yeah,
derive
yeah.
an ought from an is. Whereas Sam goes, yes, you can, right? But Jordan sits there and says to himself something along the lines of, well, there's no if we can't ground our morality in facts, then what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
And Jordan says, well, all we can really do is kind of settle for something, a kind of a more pragmatic notion of truth,
Okay.
right? So we have to kind of just ask ourselves more rather than worrying about quote unquote the what he would call like the Newtonian thing of truth, or rather than worrying about scientific facts as being the only kind of truth, we need to kind of say moral truth supersedes scientific truth, because the example he uses is like the atom bomb, so
Yeah, I remember
science.
that.
Yeah, so scientific truth is enough to get us an atom bomb, but it's not enough to stop us from killing ourselves with the atom bomb. And so Jordan says, well, that shows us that morals kind of supersede facts. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, I see where you're going. So, all right, I love this. I just want to take a step back, make sure we're on the same page. So, because like you just said, and correct me whenever I'm wrong, Jordan kind of takes a more pragmatic view on truth. And he kind of
Mm,
said, give an example, like I think it's in Old English with an arrow. It's an arrow is true and something, but it's true because it's repeatable. Like he says something along those lines, but it's a
mm.
pragmatic sense of truth.
Yeah.
But
Well,
isn't
you'll have heard him say stuff like that which is most permanent is most true. You'll have heard him say stuff like that.
yeah, and I that's a different topic, but
Yeah.
I agree with that as well. But I think in terms of truth, I think him and Brett agree. It when they acknowledge there's a pragmatic, loosely speaking, a pragmatic version of truth. You can look at truth pragmatically, whether it's with a porcupine or with an arrow.
Yeah, like, well,
There's
you see, the
that.
thing is, like, I think that all, like, Jordan, like, I would say that Jordan is just playing around with words, like, he loves doing this shit.
Yeah.
And, like, and what I mean is, like, so, like, Jordan is making a really serious claim. Like, he's not just,
Oh yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
'cause he's not just talking about this like it's a kind of manner of speaking, like, he really thinks, okay, morals are definitely real. If you doubt that they're real, go ahead and, to use his phrase, like, act that out in the world and see what it gets you. Do you
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah, yeah.
So he's sitting there going, well, morals are definitely real, but we definitely can't derive them from facts. And so his conclusion that he arrives at is, well, maybe the entire scientific notion of truth is just wrong or insufficient. And instead, we need to reconfigure our notion of truth in this more moral centered way. But of course, he still recognizes, okay, we need to orient our notion of truth around our morals, but we still can't derive our morals from our facts. So what do we do instead? Well, we need to see
Grounded.
what works,
Yeah,
see what
exactly.
works, right? And he goes, okay, well, what do you mean by what works? Do we mean it that it works today? Or does it need to work tomorrow as well? And what about next year and 10 years from now and 100 years, etc.? And this is where he arrives at his thing of that which is most permanent is most true.
Wow, I forgot he said something like that. Cause
Yeah. Like, so he means, like, he really is, like, he's not just doing what Brett is doing is just kind of what Brett is doing really is just a kind of manner of speaking. He's just rephrasing things. He's like, you know what? We can kind of think of stuff as being wrong, but still quite useful. So there's a certain kind of truth in there, Whereas Jordan is doing something way more serious. Like, he's completely flipping the table on, like, so he's saying
I
the
agree,
science.
and I'm aware, and I have like the same view as well.
Well, you see, like, so the problem, yeah. So the reason I brought this up is like I think a lot of Jordan Peterson fans don't take him seriously enough. As in, they kind of they make excuses for him. They
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
well, no, he's not really. He doesn't mean any of this too seriously. And you're like, yeah, he does. Like, this is like, because he needs this to bring in any of his stuff about archetypes and about how there's like real deep and long-term truths captured in religious stories and archetypes and everything.
No, and
Like this is where
I agree, and I feel like people should pick up on that because that's the whole
yeah,
point of the archetypes, and that's why he's
yeah,
looking at religion and so on and so forth.
exactly. Yeah, like that's the only reason he because archetypes are like his scientific method for finding truth in old stories.
And
Do
I
you know?
think, and I would argue, it is actually scientific.
I don't know. I don't know enough to be honest. I'm a bit skeptical sometimes. I think the problem with a lot of the psychoanalysis stuff is I think it was a bit ahead of its time. Like it was like him, Jung and Freud and them and that like and Adler, like they had some really cool ideas, some really fucking cool ideas about people, but they came up with them in a time period where they just like nobody else had a conception of the brain or the human psyche
Yeah.
like these guys did, and it kind of I think that led to a thing where they almost just weren't constrained, and so they
Keep
just
going.
the three of them just went fucking nuts, like you know.
Yeah, so I'll add that nuance. I think it is. I'll say it's. I think it's scientific in terms of the patterns he's fighting. He's finding the pragmatic stuff. I don't know necessarily if the psychoanalytic perspective is scientific because that I think is a little bit more philosophical.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
like psychology, you could have like a philosophical. You have an idea, and then you try and use a scientific method on that.
like so the I don't know if I know their work enough really to have a strong opinion about psychoanalysis.
Same,
I
same.
definitely like I don't agree with Jordan's idea of like totally reforming the notion of truth and things like that. I think like because if you have to be able to intelligibly talk about truth outside of morality. You need to be able to talk about, you know, it's there is a truth of the matter about whether or not I have an odd or an even number of hair on
Yeah,
my body,
yeah,
you know, and like whether or not. So like the thing about Jordan when he says we need to redefine truth in terms of what works, right? He
yeah.
This is where he gets his thing, at least if I understand it, of the Darwinian kind of truth, as in because you can't like the way I kind of pictured it, although I'm not sure he uses this phrase like nested within, you know, so like scientific truth is like nested within moral
Exactly.
truth,
Like
right?
yeah, that like
These
figure.
concentric circles, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the way I kind of imagined it was so he Jordan is looking for some kind of framework of what works. Like he's looking for like the outermost circle, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And so he arrives at the conclusion that the outermost circle about what works is Darwinism. You know, you can't get outside that, you know. Um, the issue I have is that, and Sam, in fairness, although I think Sam has some mistakes here as well, but Sam I think does a good job of showing what's wrong with what the move that Jordan is making, which is that you you never ever, if you take Jordan's idea of truth seriously, you never ever get to say that anything is true because ultimately down the road it might lead to your death.
Exactly. And this
You
is
know?
where I think they had a bit of miscommunication, and this is why I like to just go to the dictionary when we start getting into semantics, sort of,
Yeah,
and like this, like all right, let's go to the dictionary. We don't have to come up with our own definitions. We can go to there and like let's articulate this properly and work our way up. If a word doesn't fit the idea we're trying to convey, let's use
yeah,
different words.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
that is necessary. What I would say,
Absolutely.
is with Jordan, I think the way I perceive that whole discussion is just like I'm not an expert, but I think it was like the evolution of the word truth and how it was used. Because before, like I think he said, in olden times, it was used like pragmatically and like a Darwinian sense, like like an arrow. But I think with
Mm.
time and the Enlightenment, we became like, oh, but there is objectivity. And I think in terms of definition wise, just to be accurate, there's heuristics that Brett mentions. There is, let's say, an older definition of truth that's pragmatic. There is a definition of truth that's subjective. Um, science,
Like,
and then there's like to me there's logic, and in terms of like math, like one plus one is two, Pythagorean theorem. This is truth. It's objectivity. And I think that's something Sam was also trying to convey, but he kept using the word scientific truth. And I wasn't sure if he was, because there's a difference between, science and like logic. And I wasn't really sure. I felt like he was trying to describe logic, but he was saying science.
yeah, like the I suppose I would quibble, like, and look, all of those definitions can exist and people can mean all of those things by that word, by the word truth, and that's fine, you know. But I would quibble about whether or not people like way back when actually conceived of truth like Jordan is describing. Like, if you think like the ancient Greeks, when they talked about Mount Olympus and the gods that lived up there, they meant that. They that wasn't a pragmatic thing. They were like, no, 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 there really is. They're up there. We just can't go up there because it's so fucking high up in the sky. And all the gods live up there and they molded humans. And there was this golden age. And then Pandora's fucking box was opened and everything went to shit. These are things they really believed. They really believed that the seasons were caused by, Persephone having a marriage contract with Hades and things like that. Like when they said, Zeus lives on Mount Olympus, they were making a realistic claim about what they thought was true, in the same way that a scientist today says that water is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, so I would question exactly what examples Jordan could give if he wants to talk about a civilization that uses the word truth in the way that he's trying to. You know, like, because it seems like the only people that try to use the word truth like he does are 21st century Christian academics that just keep trying to fucking shovel some kind of intelligible notion of the Bible into people's mouths.
So, so I'm just gonna try and repeat what you're saying, so make sure I get it. You think
Yeah.
Jordan's position is that, at the very least, older civilizations were using truth pragmatically?
Who is he talking to? When you so I just made, because you said something there about Jordan talks about how the notion of truth has like evolved over time.
Oh,
But so like
yes.
so those people like way back when, before science came along, and who used truth in this more pragmatic way, like who are you talking about? Like, because the ancient Greeks didn't, the Romans didn't, like any of these civilizations that you're like the first Christians didn't, like
Mhm.
they really thought Jesus rose from the dead, like
Yeah,
really.
I agree. They're, like the Greeks, Christians. Um, there are some things they believe to be true. Like this is an accurate description of reality itself. Like the Greeks really believe they're gods on Mount Olympus. What I was referring to is, and again, I'm not the expert, but I think like in maybe Old English, more proper term, especially compared to American English.
Hmm.
Like that example where you said like an arrow is true. It's more so that it's accurate.
Oh, oh, okay. So like, okay, I never copped that you were talking about like that kind of expression,
The
like where people
expression,
would say an
yeah.
arrow is true. Okay, yeah. Well, like, look, I think that's maybe just a different thing. That's just people using the same word in a slightly different way. Like
Exactly,
those,
exactly, and
those
that's
people
what I
would,
meant. And I think that's
yeah.
what Jordan means. And in that
I don't think
discussion,
so.
okay,
You see, yeah, I don't think so. I think Jordan really, like, this is what I mean. I think people let him off the hook way too easy here, because I think Jordan is trying to say literally that the scientific notion of objective truth, like water is 2 parts hydrogen, one part oxygen, that's wrong. Like that's not enough to really talk about what's true in reality.
Okay.
I think that
Sorry.
I
Yeah.
think
So can you
Jordan
say
is
that
claiming
again?
that. I think Jordan is claiming that the scientific notion of truth, that the way that the Sam Harrises of this world use the notion of truth, Jordan is saying that's wrong. Like your notion of truth has to be more than quote unquote all of the scientific facts.
Okay. Okay. So here's my question. So you just said that Jordan believes the scientific method that science is not enough. And then there's this other thing that Jordan said. I think you believe Jordan said, which is ancient or older civilizations, they had that expression of truth, in terms of accuracy.
Hmm.
But I think you also believe, from Jordan's perspective, when he looks at the Greeks, Jordan's perspective is that, well, the Greeks the Greeks didn't really believe there were gods up there. They were just
Yeah,
using it pragmatically, loosely. You think
I, I
Jordan thinks that as well?
I think that he dances around that. Like I don't know if he would actually come out and say it that straight.
Mm-hmm.
But like, he has been criticized a lot for, you can ask him, like, do you think that Jesus rose from the dead? And
Yeah,
he
yeah,
won't answer it. Like this is the thing. The reason he won't answer that is because the kind of notion of truth that he is trying to bring in here, like it really is that big of a deal. Like, because if you take his notion of truth really seriously, like he does, where he's trying to say that the scientific notion of it is just wrong, it does become extremely difficult to answer the question, is it true that Jesus rose from the dead? Like, so he people who accuse him of, like, being dishonest and that there are actually wrong. He's not being dishonest. He really is trying to stick to be consistent, with what he thinks it means to say that something is
yeah. So
true.
that's when he says, "What do you mean by true?" Because he tries to
Exactly.
make sure that they're speaking the
Exactly.
same kind of true, same language. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so just from my perspective, like, so those 2 points I raised, I do agree. Personally, what I believe, I do think the Greeks actually believe there were gods in Olympus. I
Yeah.
believe that there were ancient Christians during Jesus' time that actually believed he rose from the dead. They didn't just say, well, I don't know if he rose from the dead, but it's going to be useful for me to think that he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my stance on that point. But with the idea that science isn't enough, I do agree that I think science is not enough. I think that you do need, like, the moral
Yes.
foundation or backing, something along
So
those lines.
yes. So the thing is, and the reason I brought all this up in the first place is to bring up, like, Deutsch and his, like, so the issue here is both Sam and Jordan are getting stuck on this deriving facts from values thing,
Yes.
right? That's the bit. Like, so if Jordan could accept that you can derive a fact from a value, like Jordan's entire
Wait,
enterprise
wait.
that he's
If I'm sorry, say that again. If Jordan could
but
accept,
so if Jordan could accept that, if Jordan did think that you could derive a fact from a
you
value,
mean value from facts.
excuse me, you're right.
Okay, yeah, I
Sorry,
just want to make
right,
sure. Okay, cool.
sorry. No, you're right. I was misspeaking there. If Jordan did believe that you could derive a value from a fact, then he wouldn't need all of the stuff about religions and archetypes
Oh
and yin
yeah,
yin.
yeah.
And so this is really the thing. This is the thing that it's hinging on, right? Like the problem is, like, and I'll say it straight. I haven't gone back and read the original text, but I've read the relevant passages. I've looked into it a little bit, myself, and at the direction of others. David Hume, when he made this ought is distinction, right? The problem is that most people ignore the other stuff that he wrote in the same material. So David Hume didn't just say that you can't derive an ought statement from an is statement.
Mm-hmm.
David Hume came up with this what became known as one of the most famous problems in philosophy, which was the problem of induction. So essentially,
Yeah.
David Hume realized that it's not just oughts that you can't get from is's. You actually can't derive anything from anything. You cannot take any set of statements and soundly justify a conclusion from those statements, because any of your premises that the typical way of viewing this stuff is that you have a set of premises, and then if they're in a valid structure, that's great, and then if those premises are also true, then your conclusion is sound and it's
Yeah.
true.
So like I say this a lot. So a quick example is like if all men are black and
Hmm.
Frank is a man, then
Yeah,
Frank is black. Like that.
yeah,
Two if statements
yeah,
and they conclude.
exactly. Now the thing that Hume noticed is, and no, and I say noticed, he wasn't the first one to notice
Yeah.
something like this. But what he realized is that there is no way of justifying like that argument soundly, because any of your premises will it so any justification you give for any of your premises has to itself be justified.
Yeah, it's like you can never go deep enough.
Yes, so you will just keep going and going and going and going and going and going. So
Recursive.
exactly, yeah. Well, infinite regress or whatever it's
Yeah,
called, you
yeah.
know. And the other thing he noticed is that when it comes to something like if we step out of the realm of pure logic and instead try and figure out, okay, how do we go from limited observations of things to general theories? So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I observe the sunrise every morning, and then I come up with this general theory that the sun will rise every morning, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or the really so how do we induce that general theory from our finite set of observations? And
Yes, yes.
the answer he came to was you can't.
Yeah.
You can't, right? And this became known as his problem of induction, because people were like, well, we do see, okay, we may not be able to logically do this, and yet we do it anyway.
So just I wanna because I feel like there are two things that are happening here. Just to like
Hmm.
break it into the first is this problem of induction. So I somewhat agree with that. But so what about this example? 1 plus 1 is 2. Um,
Well, like all of
is
that
that
is,
not?
yeah, well, you see, all of that is grounded, so to speak, in our understandings of, mathematics and our most basic theories of mathematics. But there's no way of justifying even those. I'm not an expert on
Exactly.
mathematics.
Exactly.
So the same thing applies in maths. The same thing applies in science and in natural sciences and in observations. And that basically, the point I'm getting at is the summation of this is people like Jordan and like Sam just talk about the ought is thing, oh, well, you can't derive an ought from an is. But Hume's full body of work essentially was just not just that you can't derive an ought from an is, you actually can't soundly derive an is from an is either, or an ought from an ought, or like anything. None of it is ever sound, right?
So what do you think about this? Um, damn. I mean, I'm not like the most intelligent philosopher.
No, neither
Um,
am I.
yeah. Uh, but I'm trying to push back a little on the induction thing because I get it. This is why for me, I kind of said this. I think it was last week. Like on one hand, there's like logos. There's like math and like I don't know what you would call that, but like those two if statements like I just did for like me being black.
Yeah,
That kind of logical arrangement. I don't know what you want. I know there's a word for it, but whatever.
valid. Yeah, it's valid.
It's valid. There's that, but then there's science. And what I mean is, because like you said, with science, it's just your observation. To me, you're using reasoning to make sense of your observations. So that's why, to me, like what you see, what you think, everything we do is, in a sense, pragmatic. We use logic to make sense of the world, but we can never 100% say that's what's in the world.
The thing is that now this is definitely way out. Like I'm way out of my depth here. Like there isn't, as far as I'm aware, actually a difference in terms of how reliable, in principle, science can be and then maths can be. So have you heard of your man Gödel? Do you know that name?
Uh,
Yeah. So he came up with these things. I think they're called like Gödel's incompleteness theorems and stuff. And in plain English, my understanding, and it could be wrong, take this with a pinch of salt.
yeah, yeah.
My understanding is that he showed that any system of mathematics, any mathematical language, a set of symbols and stuff like that, uh, is subject to the same insecurity and problem that physics is, or
Interesting.
that science is, right? Essentially, just that no system of mathematical or no mathematical language or mathematical system can definitively and provably justify itself.
Hmm.
So they're all in a sense like incomplete.
Yeah.
Uh, you could hypothetically, as far as I know, you could like rearrange the language and you could add new symbols and make a new language, and that might help you sort out some of the problems that this one over here couldn't really figure out. But now you've got this other language and it's going to have its own problems. You're never going to have just one mathematical language that like covers everything and covers all the bases and can ground itself.
Hmm.
Now, as I said, I'm way out of my wheelhouse there, so
Yeah,
half of that is
yeah,
probably wrong. Like, but the basic idea is that anyway. Gödel did to maths what Hume did to the natural sciences.
yeah. And I get that. And to me, like that's why I don't have a firm stance on, let's say, the self justification of math itself, or of that logical structure I did with me being black. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, but I completely can grasp the incompleteness of science,
yeah.
and that makes sense to me. Yeah, like that makes complete sense to me. Where it lacks the math, it's not as clear, so that's why I'm just like,
Well, like you see, so
yeah,
the reason why all of this matters is that like if Jordan's entire enterprise is hinged on this thing, well, we can't derive an ought from an is. Like it matters that he's missing the fact that you can't derive an is from an is either.
or
So
an
if
off
you
from an on. Like the
yeah,
point,
or not even off.
or
Yeah. So
even
so
to push deeper, what you're saying, he just can't derive.
yeah, exactly. You can't derive anything from anything in the way. So the standard that he is holding, quote unquote, moral truth to, if you apply that same standard to science or to facts, you undermine that as well. You like so the whole enterprise that he has built on, I say enterprise, I mean the whole worldview that he has built around morals and then superseding facts and archetypes and most permanent is most true, all of this stuff, all of that is how he has come up with, and he's applied it only to morals. He's only applied this standard to morals, but logically you need to do the same thing to science, to facts, if he's going to do it at all, right? Like, so if he is going to turn around and say like that you need all of this shit over here to justify anything morally, like you can't get away with holding facts to some other standard, if you're going to
Yeah.
say they're both just objective, if they're both just real. um
Hmm.
like Sam has never come out and explicitly said this, but he has on an occasion said that when people ask him about the ought is thing, he has made reference to the fact that he thinks most people have misread Hume. And he's never explicitly said it, but I think this is what he means.
Yeah.
I think he means the fact that like when you go back and read it, he talks a lot more than just about oughts and ises and that, right? And so this is where Popper and Deutsch come in, right? So you can't derive anything from anything. Fine.
Okay.
So Popper and Deutsch just go, fine, fine. We can't ever justify anything. All that means is that all of our knowledge is always conjectural. It's always guesses. We don't we whenever we make a claim, that claim is never justified. It's never being derived from anything. It's just a guess. And so all we do then is to let's say choose between our guesses is subject them to criticism.
Yeah.
That's it. And we can never be sure about our guesses, and we can never be sure about our criticisms and what they say about our guesses. We can always be wrong about everything. There is no such thing as a secure foundation in any scientific theory, in any moral theory, in any political system, in anything.
Yeah.
And it's so they call this fallibilism, right? So it's just so Jordan, people like Jordan and people like Sam, their whole shtick is always, you can hear them in their talks, and when the two of them talk, their whole thing was about trying to ground morality in some sense. That's the language they use. They're trying to ground it. They're trying to build a foundation from something. Popper or Deutsch would be like, no, you can't. Like, you can't do that. It doesn't work. There's no such thing as a foundation or a grounding like that. Everything is always guesses.
Yeah, and
And
would you agree, just to continue that metaphor? I think Deutsch, if you take this problem of induction and you apply it not just to math, but like to logic itself,
mm,
then it's not just that you can't have a foundation for anything. It's because I could probably say, um, okay, I don't have a foundation from this level 0, but let's just pretend level 1 is sturdy enough and work our way up. They're saying is not only can you not have a foundation, you just can't work your way up.
exactly. You could not validly anyway, not justifiably. You
Exactly.
can run through the exercise if you want to, but be you can never just take a certain statement or set of statements and stick that in the ground and call that your foundation and then build everything from there.
Yeah.
Like, you can never do that because
Hmm.
that foundation, it immediately, if you try and do that, it begs the question, well, like, why that foundation and not a different one? Like, do you know what I'm
Wait,
saying?
that's like this has to do with the problem of induction or induction. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to do with the problem of, well, if you're going to try and ground shit, if you're going to try and derive things and build
Okay.
your worldview about anything in terms of deriving stuff, you like you said, or like I said earlier, any justification you give to any statement will itself have to be justified, which will just go on and on and on and on forever
So
in an infinite regress. So you have to, if you're going to do this and you're going to try and really stick with this process, you have to pull the brakes somewhere and just call a certain statement a foundation and just go, no, I don't need to justify this. I'm going to stay here. This is going to be my foundation.
so just to make sure I'm on the same page, um, I'm gonna say something, and can you help me find where it's lacking the justification? So, like, I'll take the same example. If all men are black, and if Frank is a man,
Mm-hmm.
then Frank is black.
Okay, well, why do you think, like, where did you get the idea that all men are black?
See, I didn't, and I acknowledge, and when I say this 3 points. When I say this, I say if. I don't
Okay,
I don't pretend to believe that it's true, but if this is true, and if this is true, then it has to be true. So my
yeah.
question is the law of
So
induction.
yeah, so there you could, like, so that's not induction, that's like deduction. You're
Deducing.
deducing. Yeah, so like there's nothing wrong, like unless our it's also possible that our notions of logic itself and how it works
Exactly.
is wrong, so we can go that far, and there's nothing like, so this is the thing, like it's like our ideas about logic are themselves these unjustified guesses, you know now, like, obviously our ideas about logic, at least so far, are pretty good. They seem to do lots of good things for us and solve lots of problems for us, right? But like the problem is, and like, so this is the thing, it can sound so normal, you would just go, well, fine, look, none of this stuff is ever justified, so I guess we just guess things, right? That sounds okay,
But no,
right?
the
Fine.
implications.
Yeah, like the implications are that, like, the people like Jordan and Sam, like, they're really going for this foundation thing. It's just wrong. It's a waste of time. You can never do it. You don't. It's not just that you can't, that you can't get a foundation like that. You actually don't even need one. Because we've gotten this far with science and morals, but let science is the obvious one, right? Science has managed to go from basically nothing, where people had all kinds of crazy ideas 500 years ago, to landing on the moon and discovering, quantum physics. And it's done all of that despite the fact that foundational ideas are impossible.
Okay. So just to step back a little. That's what I wanted to clarify. That example you made it clear to me. Oh, that's like a problem of deduction, not induction.
Mm.
And I thought induction was going so far as to say that deduction. I thought the problem of induction was
Mhm.
also going as far to say that deduction is also invalid.
Well, you see, so you could, in a sense, so you might, in order to apply any deduction that you've done today, to apply that generally and say, well, this means, so you could say, Frank is black and all men are black, so Frank is a man, right? To take that example and apply that and say, well, therefore, there is a general theory about how deduction works, that you can, generally speaking, derive conclusions from premises. That requires induction. You actually need to inductively do that.
Whoa, whoa. Okay, all right. Um, I don't know. Okay, we can keep going. We can. I think we can focus more on the Jordan part and not on the deducing versus inducing. So I think we'll just keep going down the rabbit hole. That'll take a
Well,
lot longer. But it
well,
is.
okay.
I am interested.
Like, so, because this stuff is relevant to the Jordan thing,
No,
because
and I see that.
the thing is that, like, Jordan, a lot of what Jordan says is he's on the money. He's really getting at some stuff, but he's really wrong about how he gets to most of it. You know, so that's the really cool thing about Jordan, is he seems to be really fucking clever, and he has come up with all kinds of cool ideas that are really fucking interesting. But like, a lot of his methods are just like all over the place, and so, like, if we take the induction thing, right, and let's take a less uh, a bit more of a simple example, right? Like, how do you know that the sun is going to rise tomorrow?
You
How do you
don't.
know that? You don't, right? But we do, at the same time, regardless, we do say that it's completely scientific, or it's completely rational to, quote unquote, expect that it will,
Because of
right?
repeatability. It's a yeah.
So what most people think is happening, most philosophers think is happening, is that there is some kind of induction that is possible, that is getting us to this general idea that the sun rises every morning,
But no,
right? Yeah, so this is like this whole problem of induction stuff, man. It's absolutely nuts. Like, I mean, it's some of the stuff like you'll read. Some people write about it is really nuts. Like, isn't so the the issue is that to take your example of the man and the deduction and things. If you wanted to say so to claim that that argument is true tomorrow, or to say that it will. So if you would say, so you might say a man is black, Frank is a man, therefore Frank is black, or some version of that, right? All men are black, Frank is a man, therefore Frank is black. To claim that that argument is going to be sound tomorrow requires, at least according to people who believe in induction, some kind of inductive theory.
So,
You
and then to push back, you claim that would require induction. I would say, just to play devil's advocate, wouldn't that actually require deduction?
no, because the thing is that what would be the best way of putting this? Like, you can never know that, for example, one of that any one of those premises won't be like shown to be false tomorrow. Like, that's the point.
But no, so
But
I would challenge that and say this is why the key phrasing was if this premise is true, if this premise is true, because I don't know if it's true today.
right, well, like, yeah, but people don't just now. Okay, okay, fair enough. That's what you're doing now. But like, in reality, we have to put forward an idea about what we think is true. Like,
Yeah,
as in,
so
like,
we have to live.
yeah. Well, no, but it's more than just we have to live. The point, the a lot of our knowledge doesn't just work off of it. Like, a lot of our knowledge has nothing to do with if statements. It really is. It's of the form like, well, all men really are black. Frank really is a man. Therefore, Frank really is black. Like, that's the kind of argument that gets put forward. Like, people don't go around speaking in hypotheticals, and ideas and the way they connect to each other, and that when a scientist builds a nuclear bomb, he's not just working off of hypotheticals. He's not saying, well, if so and so.
No, so I would say, let me just take a step back and say maybe most people aren't conscious of these ideas. But let's say,
Mm.
like, for example, myself, when I move and progress in life, I'm aware that, like, when I get on the plane, when the sun rises, to me, I'm making an estimation, and I choose to accept and work off an estimation.
Yeah,
And that's
like,
kind of what you're saying. Like, people don't do this, they work off estimates.
no, like, well, yes, people do in a sense, like, but like the problem of induction stuff is deeper than that. It's like the issue that Hume was trying to figure out was our scientific theories really do seem to be, let's say, doing something. They're it's not an accident that they achieve whatever it is a
Like, there
particular
must be
theory.
something here.
So there has to be something to the idea that, okay, water really is in some sense two parts hydrogen and one part oxygen, because when we conduct chemistry using those ideas, like, we're able to do all kinds of amazing things. But the reason why the problem of induction stuff is so important is that Hume showed that logically you can't do any of that. Logically, none of our theories can ever be derived from other theories, and yet we quote unquote seem to do it all the time. And more than that, when we seem to do it, it fucking works. It works for us.
Yeah, so it's like, let me just phrase this another way.
Yeah.
Like all these physics equations. I mean, you already know. You take force, and
Yeah.
whatever direction you want to go, but there's force, there's momentum, the derivation of that, and so on and so forth. And we build on these physical equations. Like what I did with the man thing, we could
Hmm.
say, well, if, but what you're saying is that, fine, we could say if this equation, if this equation, if this equation, but what's phenomenal is that it works. So there must
Yes,
be something here.
yes. So this is why like Hume's problem of induction became so famous, and this is why people like Jordan are obsessed with it, or obsessed with the ought is part at least, and this is why, for example, like all of these arguments took place hundreds of years ago,
Yeah,
and
yeah, we're nothing new here.
people came up with answers. People came up with answers that seemed, at least to most of them, satisfactory when it came to, excuse me, facts, when it came to science, right? Um, but nobody ever bothered to come up, or not so bothered, but nobody ever successfully came up with the same kind of satisfactory answers when it comes to morals, right? And that's why Hume's ought is distinction is still so fucking widely talked about today, you know. But the the thing is that people like Jordan are mistaken. They're mistaken when they say that anybody came up with satisfactory answers to Hume's problem. Well, actually, no, one person did. Karl Popper did. He solved it. He solved the problem by essentially putting forward this theory. Well, then fine. There's no such thing as justification. There's no such thing as any of that. What we have is we notice a conflict in between two ideas. We call that a problem, and then we guess at solutions to that problem, and then we pick between the solutions by criticizing them. And the one that just kind of limps on, not as badly damaged as the rest of them by criticism, we just use that.
And it's like more pragmatic.
No, it's not pragmatism. So like
Oh, right,
Popper
right,
would say,
because it's still in the abstract.
well, Popper is still after like the more like realist notion of truth. He's still
Yeah, yeah.
he's he Popper would not say that, water being two parts hydrogen and one part oxygen. That's not just like pragmatically true. Like Popper would say that it's absolutely rational to claim that that is true,
Or
but just that,
at the least, it's the most rational.
well, it's just that we can never be certain that it's true, but that doesn't mean it isn't rational to claim that it's true. It's just because it's the best we've got.
Exactly, exactly.
You know,
Um,
but pragmatic notions of truth are much more strict than that. They really are just, well, if something works, it's true.
yeah.
But that's not what Popper is after at all.
Okay, yeah, because I think I see where you're going with this. Again, to take a step back, because I think we're finding the right language. Because back at some point I said the problem of induction, I think both agree, is that you always need a deeper foundation. But last time I said the problem of induction means that you can't also build up.
Yeah,
But you can, that's deduction, like the whole man example. It's if this or this. So you can build
yeah.
up if you assume a
If you're
premise is true.
yes. So you can. I think I could be wrong with this. I think Popper, and I don't know if he came up with this phrase. He calls this hypothetical deductivism.
Yeah,
So he's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, hypothetically, if we take this stuff as true, then this other stuff follows. You
Okay, and
know,
I'm
you know,
completely down with that. And this is why
yeah,
when I go to math, let's say like 1 plus 1 is 2, the way I see that, I kind of see the parallel.
yeah,
It's if 1 is a whole 1, if
yeah,
1, then you
yeah,
get 2.
yeah.
Okay.
And like that's fine. But the reason why this is significant, right? The reason why this matters is that it means that the whole, ironically, the foundation of Jordan's argument, which is you can't derive an ought from an is just irrelevant to the whole conversation about morals, because you can't derive an ought from an is, but you can't derive an is from an is either, and yet we still talk about scientific objective truth in the way that Sam does.
And I
We
think
still talk about, hydrogen and oxygen and atom splitting, and
yeah.
that really it really does happen, right? Whereas, okay, let me put this in a concise way. Okay, if we can't derive an is from an is, and yet we can make objective, non-pragmatic statements of truth when it comes to science, well then the fact that we can't derive an ought from an is irrelevant, because we can make non-pragmatic truth statements in science even though we can't derive that shit. So therefore we should be able to make non-pragmatic truth statements in morals.
Okay, so I'm gonna push you a bit here.
That was
Uh,
really terribly phrased.
no, but I think I see where you're going, but I just want to make sure. So, because just to push back on the wording, you said something like, if we can make observational, non-pragmatic, or scientific, non-pragmatic observations.
So what I said was we can make we can talk about things being true in a non-pragmatic way
Oh
in
yeah,
science,
in
and we can do
science.
in science,
I
right?
don't know
Now,
about that. I don't know about that.
wait, no, because this was the whole point, like, of it. The fact that we can't derive an is from an is doesn't stop us from being able to do that in science. So the fact that we can't derive an ought from an is shouldn't stop us in the area of morals either from making non-pragmatic truth statements.
All right, so you said the sentence in the abstract. Can you give an example with is and is
Well,
ought not?
yeah, so like we can objectively say that it's possible that the statement that, like, what's the best? Okay, let me give you an example.
Yeah, just like break it down.
Well, like, so you shouldn't put your hand on a hot stove,
Fair.
like, moral statement, right?
More as a moral statement.
Well, it is, because I'm saying you shouldn't.
Oh,
I'm saying,
okay.
I'm saying you
Yeah,
shouldn't do that.
yeah, okay.
Okay, like, that is or we could say that it is morally wrong to force women to wear something like the burqa, or the niqab, or whatever you want to call it. Like, you can objectively say that it is wrong to do that, and that is as objective, as saying that water is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. Like, that's the implication of all of this stuff. As in, like, if you take Hume's skepticism generally and you just apply, you just kind of go, okay, fine, but you just accept, therefore, that then everything is about guesses and everything is just about criticism. Then there's no need to think of these kinds of, okay, there's facts over here and there's values over here, and we kind of have different standards of assessing
Because
them.
you can't ground any of it.
Yeah, it's so you don't. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, because they're all on the same level in the sense that you can't ground any of them.
Yeah.
You like, I'm not doing an amazing job of explaining all of this, like, but it's like,
No, but I get. I think that's the. I think I get where you're coming from. I think that's the most. That's the core of what you're saying. Like you can't ground it, and then our response to that should be sort of like, well,
who cares?
I'm hesitant to say, but yeah, who cares? Because pragmatically, I mean, we're doing the science and it's working. Something's working. And we should
Well,
keep
it's not
going in this direction, more
Yeah,
or
so
less.
it's not just something, and this is the thing. Popper solved this. Popper figured out what that something was,
Mm-hmm.
right? Popper said is like, okay, this whole enterprise of, because so when Hume put forward his problems of
Mm-hmm.
induction and oughts and ises and stuff, people tried to solve it by essentially coming up with some new versions of induction, or they tried to apply some kind of, they've tried to justify induction. They tried to come up with some argument that grounded various like forms of induction and deduction and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And Popper came along and was like, all of this is a waste of time because all of this is obsessed with this notion of justifying.
Hmm.
It's all about how can we justify this stuff. But what he pointed out was that what's happened here is a very, very subtle change of subject. That
Okay.
people have changed the question because they have turned the question of how can we know to how can we be certain about things.
Which isn't no, but it's kind of like
It's a
uh,
feeling. The thing about certainty is that certainty is a subjective feeling. I feel certain about stuff.
or is it another way to say it's not no, but it's no enough.
Well, it's he would say like how can we ever rationally claim that something really is true?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Popper was like, we absolutely can do that without worrying about how certain we are.
Hmm.
We don't need to be certain about things. We don't need to ever really, really feel like something is definitely right.
Mm-hmm.
We can treat ideas in a way that has nothing to do with our certainty or any other of our fucking opinions about those ideas. And we can treat them as guesses that are never justified and then go, well, okay, hypothetically, if we take this guess seriously, what are some of the implications of it? What
Mm-hmm.
do we think are some of the implications of it?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the consequences of it?
Mm-hmm.
And is there any of those that we can immediately identify as wrong in some way? Or when it comes to science, is there any of those that we can immediately test and stuff? Right?
Okay.
So he was like, we can do all of that without ever asking ourselves how certain we feel, or without ever trying to quote unquote justify an idea or corroborate it or anything. We can just go, okay, we have a couple of guesses and we have an idea about what some of these guesses imply about the world and
Mm-hmm.
about people or whatever it is we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all these criticisms of some of these theories, of these ideas. So,
Okay.
how about we just say that the rational thing to do is to keep the theory which survives that criticism the best?
And by surviving the criticism best, another way to say would be maybe that has the least amount of criticisms.
Kind of. It has the least amount of problems. Yeah. Known problems.
Yeah.
Because there might be some. The thing
Unknown
is that,
unknowns.
yeah, so we can be wrong about our criticisms. We can be wrong that, like, so we think we've disproved a theory, or we think one theory like stands up to a certain experimental test or some other kind of argument or something, but we can be wrong about that too.
And then that's
Like,
when reality, I think this is what you meant. Like the pragmatism can be more strict.
yes, pragmatism is still going after this kind of grounding shit,
I
but it's
mean, I
trying to
think it
ground.
manifests it, right?
Yeah. So pragmatism is still trying to ground truth in something in something. It's trying to ground it in quote unquote what works. So it's trying to say, well, we know that a theory works, so we should be able to say that that theory is then true, right? But Popper is like, no, to hell with all of that. We don't need any of that shit. We need to stop this whole enterprise of trying to justify ideas has to go.
Yeah, another way to say it is then to like use kind of like the term you mentioned earlier. I'm saying it another way, but I think it has the same core what we're going after. You can use hypothetical deduction to determine which guesses have the least amount of criticisms.
Yeah, problems and new criticisms, whatever you want to say. That's the basic outline, right? And the like so the whole schema that Popper proposed was a completely different one than what people thought happened before. Like, so people before him thought it was something like, so we start off with some kind of limited, whether it's observations or a set of premises or something like that, and we can derive some kind of limited conclusion or limited theory or something from that, and then we can use some kind of induction to generalize that theory into something that's like more widely applicable. So you can say, you can go from this gets you to your general theory of saying, well, the sun will rise tomorrow and it'll rise the day after that and it'll rise the day after that, you know. Whereas Popper was like, no, don't need any of that. We just start with a problem, right? So we actually start by noticing something that we can't explain or that we have an issue with, right? And we guess answers to it.
And then I guess
And, and then we criticize those guesses. And once we have an answer that we're happy enough, it dealt with the criticisms well enough that we're happy with it, we just kind of tentatively adopt that solution,
until we
right?
come up with a better one,
Until
or
we come up
another
with
way to say it, one with even less criticism.
yes. And of course, one of the things that also falls out of this is that as we guess solutions to problems, we inevitably run into new problems
Mm-hmm.
because those guesses themselves, because they're never justified, they will also be fallible. They will also always have mistakes in them. And we
Mm-hmm.
can never know, quote unquote, we can never be certain about what any of those mistakes are.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we guess new things to solve those problems. And it will go on literally
Oh my
forever.
god. So this is crazy. So here's another way of saying it. I think that you might agree. It's like we can never know what's right, but we can know what's wrong.
Kind of. Well, they see there is an asymmetry to falsifying something and proving that it's true. So, like we used this example last week. No amount of observations of a white swan can logically prove that all swans are white.
Yeah, you can't prove it. You can't prove the
Yeah,
positive, but you can prove
you
the
can never be
negative.
certain, right? Yeah, but then the minute you see one black swan, you know, it's like, okay, right.
So this
If
won't.
that, but even then, you can't be certain of that either, because you might have just, it could be there could be other possibilities. Maybe your eyes are playing tricks on you or
Oh
something.
yeah, yeah. But I think,
So
let me rephrase that. So instead of like just positive and negatives, it would be the same language. Uh, how was it? I could say abstract, but the hypothetical. You cannot prove a hypothetical positive, but you can
yes,
prove a hypothetical negative.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so all right, this is crazy because all right, I've Jordan kind of started. Here's a broad description. Jordan kind of in his life path, he was trying to figure out how how Hitler came to power, how the Russian, the communism came into power. It's like, what's going on here? It's deeper than economics. He says, something deeper in here, and then he get into this whole thing, and then you get into the meaning of life, and it's like, well, it's maybe more so with responsibility, and it's more than just happiness, so on and so forth. I've been trying to kind of, like many others, I'm trying to like ground this or just try to arrive at something deeper. So
Yeah.
here's a pattern that I'm trying to. Here's some things, like things like 5 things that I'm trying to determine the relationship between.
Okay.
And the first is, let's say, truth. Let me say this: truth is eternal. And when I say truth, I don't mean heuristics. I don't mean the scientific. I mean like the logos, the like the math. Like when I say like
Like
if
reality.
this, hmm,
Reality. Yeah. Like as in the fact of the matter, the truth of the matter.
sure.
Yeah.
And to me, truth is eternal. Um, and maybe a little bit more abstract. I could also say, literally more abstract. Abstraction is eternal. So let me give you an example of what I mean. Superman. The Pythagorean theorem. Let me see. Uh, a Corvette, right? Was a recent invention in terms
Yeah.
of mankind. then you have like the blueprints, and not just the paper, the abstract design. Remember Emergence, like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea of a Corvette always existed, I would argue. Always existed, but humans discovered it in a way, and then we manifested it in reality.
I don't think that's right. I don't think it existed before we came up with it. I think it existed absolutely after. Like so yeah, so this is yeah.
So
What
here's an example. Here, just one more. Pythagoras theorem. That always existed, right? That's like a logos thing. It's a math. One plus one is
no,
two.
no,
All
it
right.
didn't. It didn't.
All
It
right.
didn't.
Go.
So again, you have to remember that like Pythagorean theorems and that like it was people in Pythagoras's school came up with those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Those ideas were created in exactly the same way that our more modern ideas were created. So they're guesses too. This is the implications of Popper's idea. He's like you have to in your head just shake off all the cobwebs that there are any ideas that we can somehow view as more certain or more true or more probably true or anything or any way you want to put it. Everything is just this really complicated web of guesses.
So let me. I'm trying to digest what you're saying, and let me go through an example. Let me try and pinpoint. Help me pinpoint it. So the whole idea of one plus one is two. I
Yeah.
think we, even with the problem of induction, we know this is true because
Well, we can
I'm saying
hypothetically.
if one and if
Yeah.
one that equals
Yeah.
two.
Hypothetically. Well, it's not just one and one. There's also a hypothetical about the operator plus and the operator equals. About what they are and about how they. So like plus is like a particular kind of computation. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
so there's theories about that about what exactly is it in reality that this operator is describing and what exactly is it because clearly it seems to be able to describe some kind of relationship between whatever one is and the other one. So but again we can be wrong about all of that like because people didn't used to have that notation system. Other civilizations, even further back in history, used other operators and used other symbols and stuff to describe things. So all of them are theories as well. They're just mathematical ones.
But would it this fall under like deduction? Because I understand the problem of induction,
Yeah.
but we can still deduce. And
Yes. Hypothetically. Hypothetically.
yes, so all right. So let me phrase it this way: the hypothetical um, equation of one plus one equals two, I would say is true.
I would say it's true in the same way that hypothetically 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen gives you a water molecule. That
Mm.
both of those statements are quote unquote true in the same sense. Just that hypothetically, if we accept the stuff, the guesses that it comes from,
Yes, the premise.
yeah,
Then we have this conclusion.
we accept the guesses that they come from, then we can say that the two claims are true.
Just like
Uh,
the whole man and black
yes,
thing.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and like so it's the thing is that to bring it back to the thing you said about this stuff really did exist beforehand, right? So the actual like ontology, the stuff, so whatever it is that 1 plus 1 equals 2 in reality, whatever it is describing, right? Whatever the fact of the matter, the truth of the matter really, really is, that existed long before any of our ideas came along. But the ideas themselves, the specific theories themselves of 1 plus 1 equals 2, they didn't exist.
Oh
So there's a
yeah,
difference.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
So
the quote unquote theory, but like I like the way you said it. Can you say it again? But the matter of it.
the fact of the matter, the truth of the matter, the ont. Do you know what I mean? If I use the word ontology,
I believe so. Yeah, and I think what you're
yeah,
saying is like the hypothetical. We're using like this language.
yeah. Well, so you have to distinguish between what is true in reality and then our knowledge of that reality.
Exactly, and that's what I'm getting
So
at.
yeah, so our the thing is that 1 + 1 = 2 falls into the realm of our knowledge,
Yes,
right?
but then I'm
So
speaking of the reality
okay,
aspect.
yeah. So in that sense, yeah, whatever it is, 1 + 1 = 2 is describing in reality that existed before we came along.
and
Absolutely,
and that always existed.
presumably, yeah.
Yeah. All right, because this is where I was getting at. Okay, so and just to say it again, yes. We discovered it a certain time, just like we discovered Corvettes and chairs and the planets. There was
So
a there.
Corvettes did not. No, yeah. So the idea of a Corvette did not exist before humans came up with it. There's nothing. There's no Corvette like in reality that's waiting for us to discover it.
No, I agree. There's no
Where
Corvette in reality. That's waiting for us to
yeah,
discover it. I agree with
yeah,
that. But I would
okay.
say, I mean, to me, there's like this relationship, and there's the 1 + 1 = 2 discovery in terms of the realm of human knowledge, and like you said, there's a difference. I want to make sure we're speaking the same way.
Yeah,
Within
fine.
the realm of human knowledge, that was discovered at a certain date relative to human history, and then there's 1 + 1 = 2, the hypothetical, the abstraction that exists in reality. And
Hmm.
to me, like that's like the definition of an idea. It's an abstraction.
Yeah.
So the idea of 1 + 1 = 2 always existed.
No, the abstraction. So the thing is that there are parts of reality I think that are abstract and they are real. So there are very, very real
Exactly.
abstractions in reality.
Even though
So
they don't,
whatever.
even though
So
they
one,
don't physically manifest, they're
yeah. So
still
they're
real.
well, they don't physically exist. They exist abstractly.
Exactly, and
So
that's still
yeah,
real.
but yeah, exactly. I agree
Okay.
with that.
Okay.
But 1 + 1 = 2 is an abstract theory. Yeah, it's a theory that describes abstract things. One is not something which is a concept that exists physically. Neither is plus, neither is equals. So it's a theory that describes abstract things, but the abstract things that are in the theory, okay, the whatever it is that theory is describing in reality, that's real. That whatever that abstract thing is, that's real, and it has always existed, right? The one the but the abstract but the exact manifestations, the exact abstractions that are in our theories, they didn't exist until like we came along. Our knowledge, because they're like, okay, let me take a slightly. Can I think of a simpler example?
I don't know. 1 + 1 is pretty simple.
Well, it is, but the problem is just when you're talking about abstractions, it gets a bit hairy because all of our knowledge is itself abstract, and
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, like so. Okay, Newton and his theory of gravity, right? So we know that there is something that we call gravity, and it is real. It exists, absolutely, and it exists ontologically, right? In
Okay.
there, in reality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So putting aside like any humans and any human ideas and anything like that, there's something, and we call it gravity, and it exists, right? So then Newton came up with his theories of gravity that attempted to describe it and describe what it was. And it described it as a force, right? But so that knowledge of gravity, that knowledge of it didn't exist until Newton came up with it. But gravity itself obviously did exist. So whatever his theory was
Okay, I see
describing,
it. I see what you're saying.
you,
It's like
you
the
see what I'm
idea of
saying?
gravity, and then the idea about the idea of gravity.
Kind of, yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
it's new.
So
There's the idea of gravity, and then Newton had an idea
yes,
about gravity, which is the idea. He had an idea about the idea of
yeah.
gravity.
Yes, yes. So there is this thing, and we know it's real, and we call it gravity. It's this thing that pulls us to the ground. And it's the same then with maths, right? So there is some part of reality that really did exist, and it's an abstract part
Mm-hmm.
before we came along.
Mm-hmm.
But our mathematical theories
Mm-hmm.
that try to describe that part of reality,
Mm-hmm.
and even though they are abstract as well, they didn't exist until we came up with them. So 1 + 1 = 2,
Mm-hmm.
that didn't exist until we came up with it. But the thing that 1 + 1 = 2 seems to be describing, the underlying, the so in the same way that gravity existed, but then there's Newton's theories of gravity that kind of sat on top of it, right? It's the same thing. So there's some kind of underlying part of reality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's our theories, 1 + 1 = 2, sit on top of it, and they try to approximate it.
Yeah,
Do you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Like,
interesting.
but that,
Cause,
like,
cause yeah, like okay, so I'm just trying to digest this. So, and I'm trying to use the same language as you. So, yeah, there's some part of reality that numbers and just 1 + 1 = 2 always existed ontologically, and there's the idea of that always existed ontologically. But then there's
yeah,
our
so,
theory that humans of addition and all that that's layered on top of that.
yeah. So the metaphor that gets used a lot is the difference between the territory and the map, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of our maths, like 1 + 1 = 2, that's like a map of a certain abstract territory in reality. Does that help more? Does that metaphor help?
Yeah, yeah. So say that again, because I didn't hear the
So,
last part.
okay, we'll
You said it perfectly. I just need to hear it again.
okay. So you've got the territory, and then you've got our map of the territory.
Yes.
So our 1 + 1 = 2, and all of the mathematical theories involved in that, they go on to our map of just this little this abstract slice of reality of the territory.
Yeah.
So we have uh, gravity. Gravity is the territory, and then you have Newton's map of gravity, and there's all of his equations and shit. And
Yeah.
so then we have if we take it to the maths thing, same idea. You have this abstract slice of reality, and there's a bunch of abstractions and shit, whatever the hell that is. And then there's our map of it, and our map of that is consists of things like 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. Okay. And just to all right. So find my plot hole or what my error here, because I get, let's say, maps and territories. The maps were invented long after the territory. The territory, considering the Earth forming and all of that, relatively has been there before the maps.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if we take, let's say, 1 + 1 = 2, but then you have the map, which is whoever wrote, I don't know, addition. Pick a guy. He said, "Hey, this is a theory," and they wrote it
Mm-hmm.
down somewhere, and that was the map for 1 + 1 = 2. So this has always existed, but then someone wrote on it, and then the map came into came into
Yeah,
existence.
yeah, like somebody actually had to draw the map, you
Yes,
know.
but so I'm trying to go even further. So I get that there's the abstraction. 1 + 1 = 2. Ontologically, this is an
Yeah,
abstraction. This has
that's
always
the territory.
existed.
That's the territory.
Yes. Then there's the map when man, discovered it, became aware of it, I would say, and they wrote it down.
Yeah.
Right? So someone wrote this down. It's like, hey, look, this is here. And the writings came into existence. But the idea of the writing,
No, no, no,
that what
no,
about
no.
that?
You're complicating it just a little bit. There's no need for that last bit, right? You have your territory, and it's filled with abstractions,
Mm-hmm.
and those abstractions are real.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the territory, and we are just flailing around in the dark trying to draw an accurate map of the territory, right?
Yeah.
And so our attempts to describe the territory, and in this case, it's a territory filled with abstractions, look like 1 plus 1 equals 2. So 1 plus 1 equals 2 is the map, right? It really is. It is our attempt to describe abstract reality.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's no then like idea of the map and things like that. You don't need that. You've got what is and what really is true. That's your territory, and then you got our attempts to describe that, which is, well, we seem to have this thing, and we can say one, and then we have this operator, and we can call it a plus, and we know what these mean, and or we have some idea about what these mean. And when we say 1 plus 1, and then we have this other operator, it's equals, it gives us 2. And when we use this shit, it lets us do all kinds of cool stuff.
Interesting.
Um, so it's like all of that is just a map of the territory that is like kind of like abstract
And you would
reality.
say that, because let's say this is in a book, right? Even though, let's say, the theory of addition, let's call it that. Because again, addition, I want to be careful my words, but whatever. So you have this book of addition, the theory of addition. You would say even the abstraction of the theory of addition, the idea of it, is not eternal. It came into
No,
existence
when
at
someone thought,
when someone became aware of it,
no, when someone thought of
thought
it.
of it,
So
because
yeah,
it's not something you're aware
so
of. Got it.
yeah,
You're
so
aware of the
yes, so the
ontological.
the reality is there, but like our ideas do not like sit around and waiting for us to just stumble on them. Like we come up with them. We actually guess them. Like we create them. We just go, well, maybe this is true, but it's never justified. We can never be certain of it. So it's not like, this is what I mean. So this is why you have to be really careful. Like 1 plus 1 equals 2 is a map. But the thing is that your map, when you're done drawing it, there's all kinds of mistakes on
Yeah,
that map, and we don't know about any. We might not know about any of those mistakes. And we could be wrong about what's mistaken on the map, and we might 50 years from now cross off a part of the map and be like, we don't like this anymore, and get rid of it and replace it with some new thing. We might write some new part of the map. And that's what we do in science all the time. We take bits of our maps and we look at them, and then we suddenly notice something about it, and we go, "Oh, that doesn't seem right." And so we look a bit closer, and then we come up with whole new guesses about what might be better to put on the map on that bit.
Mm. Okay, so just have some fun. What about this?
okay. So what do you think about this? What if I say, again, so check this out. So there's the deduction, if one and one if another one, that equals two. So,
Yeah.
oh no, let me make this even more common sense. If all men are black, and if Frank is a man, then Frank is black, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So what if I did this? What if all men are black, and Frank is a man, and now I'm thinking, so Frank's gray. That's wrong.
You say that. So you're saying, so we're hypothetically, if all men are
Hypothetically,
black, and hypothetically, if Frank is
a
a man,
man, and
but
then I
then
say my conclusion is that normally the answer would be then Frank is black.
yeah.
But what if I say, well, Frank is gray?
So you're concluding that Frank is
Incorrect.
gray.
Yeah,
Incorrect. Yeah.
incorrectly.
Yeah, you're just incorrect. Like you've incorrectly applied our current ideas about deductive logic.
Oh, correct. And I would say that's an incorrect deduction, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So,
But imagine you like imagine you hypothetically said all men are black, and then you hypothetically said Frank is a man, and then you observed that Frank actually has yellow skin, right? Or you hypothetically did anyway. You looked at it and it seemed yellow, you know, like that would immediately say to you, okay, either my observation that he has yellow skin is wrong, right? Or one of my premises is we've hypothetically said it was true, but obviously one of them isn't.
Exactly. I completely agree with all of that, what you just said.
Yeah.
So here's my thing. But if I say hypothetical men are black, and hypothetically if Frank is a man, and then I say,
Yeah.
so hypothetically Frank is gray, that's an incorrect deduction. So this
Yes.
incorrect deduction, this abstraction right here, that I just created this scenario.
Yeah.
You would say, I created this today. This abstraction this is the first time I thought of this. This, I'm pretty sure no one else would think of this.
Mhm.
This existed today. Like
you've just created,
just created.
just one more on top of a million other wrong ideas.
Exactly. It's a wrong idea, just broadly speaking.
So this is like the when you stop thinking about truth in terms of its relation to like certainty and its justification and stuff like that, you realize that you've really put a big fucking wedge in here now, because what you've got now is just, and you've kind of put your finger on it with this example, like all you've really got are just wrong ideas, and then other ideas which, at least as far as we can tell, are a little bit less wrong.
They haven't been wrong yet. We haven't found.
Yeah, we're not yet aware of how they're wrong.
Exactly.
So human beings, and our knowledge of human beings, or human beings themselves, are fallible.
Mm-hmm.
And all of our knowledge, literally all of it, is like infinitely, is equal in its ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, this is what makes what something like Jordan is trying to do, which is all about trying to justify shit.
Yeah.
Like, it makes it like it's completely like well-intentioned, desperately well-intentioned, but wrong.
Yeah,
like,
and
really
I completely agree with that. So my question would be: is this bad idea, this wrong idea I came up with? Yeah, the incorrect deduction.
I've got maybe like 10 more minutes, by the way. I don't mean to be rude, but
no, because we went way over. We went like double the time now. So.
It's okay. Yeah.
We would say it was created.
Yeah, conjectured
today.
Yeah.
Would this, and this is an abstraction, this is an idea that was created, that was conjectured today.
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. Huh. So I would say it became, I'm using really weird language. This is the common language. It became alive today. Like, will it ever, this idea was brought into existence.
It was created. Yeah. It existed after you created it. Yeah.
Exactly. Or conjecture, whatever. But the point is that it exists now. It did not exist before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So my point is there a point in time when it will stop existing?
That's an interesting question.
Because you brought this up, and this is twisting my mind, because to me, every abstraction, even this one, this isn't me conjecturing. This is me becoming aware of a bad idea that's not manifested in reality physically, but it's still an idea.
The reason why it's wrong to say that you've become aware of it is that in order to describe this process of becoming aware, it implies that you are receiving this knowledge from some kind of source, or something that, like, so Popper has this idea that all observations are theory laden. So we perceive nothing for what it really is, because when you think about it, everything that you quote unquote sense, right? All of your touch sensations, sight, hearings, taste, all of it really is just crackles of electricity in your brain.
Yeah.
That goes through this weird process where it gets transformed into a conscious experience, right? But this is why our senses can be fooled.
Yeah.
And why our senses can show us stuff that isn't really there.
Absolutely.
because every single observation you ever make about anything is theory laden. And
Yeah.
so this, it's not that there are this rules out the possibility that you can just like become aware of anything, because what you're doing is every time you like think about anything or observe anything, is you are interpreting all of it through the theories and the ideas that are already in your head. And it's only through this interpretation that you then notice whenever there's a problem. And then you guess new solutions to those problems.
All right.
Well, we can like pause that here because we can keep going. And it's something I'm gonna definitely keep throughout the week. Just play with. I will
Yeah.
say just to end, the original pattern I wanted to come up with was, let's say, to use the right language, the ontological ideas, abstractions that do exist in reality are eternal. And I believe there's a relationship between this category of abstraction, longevity, which is in this case, it's eternity, and then there's functionality. And to me, another way to say it is like that which works forever is eternal.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't worry too much, like, because I've been having some interesting conversations with some of the other. So this worldview, by the way, that Popper put forward and Deutsch, it's called critical rationalism. But it's like I've been having the question you asked about whether or not these ideas ever quote unquote like stop existing. Then I think the answer to that is probably yes. Um, like, as in, you can have a scenario where an idea, let's say, gets lost. So someone can come up with an idea and they might write it down and they might tell it to a few people, and it might be good. They might solve some problems and stuff like that. But if all of the people who know about that idea die and all of the books and stuff where it was written in get destroyed, then it's gone.
Yeah,
It
see,
doesn't
so
exist.
that's interesting. It's like, in your perspective, ideas or abstractions have to be manifested physically in order for the abstraction to exist.
You see, the interesting thing about our ideas, and I don't think I fully understand this because I've been having a bit of an ongoing kind of disagreement and stuff with some of the other guys who are into this stuff. The interesting thing about our ideas when we come up with them is that the minute they're instantiated once, like, so we had this conversation last week about how information is independent.
Ooh, and we didn't even touch on that. I've thought about that a lot.
So like information is actually independent of any of its physical mediums.
Exactly.
So the minute you come up with an idea, so what's actually happening physically when you come up with an idea is that idea gets instantiated in neurons in your brain. So that's its physical medium at first, right? But the interesting thing is that the interesting thing is that, okay, so it is physically instantiated there,
Yeah.
but it's actually independent of it,
Right?
because it can go on all of them, right?
Right?
So the funny thing is, like, does it still exist afterwards? Fuck it, I don't know. If everybody forgets about it, does it still exist?
And this is why I was saying it's an abstraction. This is why initially, and I could be wrong, I thought every bad idea, the infinity numbers, they exist in the abstract. It's just only certain ones physically manifest themselves, and only certain ones are true.
Yeah, and only certain ideas cause themselves to remain instantiated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is the really interesting thing. Like, Popper calls this his like three worlds. So like, if you don't make the move that he does when it comes to that, you can have these guesses and shit. What a lot of philosophers are left with is that you have one world, which is like the world of physical objects and stuff, the world out there, outside your head. And then the other world is the world that's in your head,
Mm-hmm.
experiences and stuff like that. But Popper essentially is like, okay, fine, those two worlds exist, but there's also this world of we can come up with these abstract ideas and we can call this our knowledge, and then they seem to become completely fucking autonomous from us. They have, so someone can come up with the idea of natural numbers, right? So that's an idea that there's such a thing as natural numbers. But then independent of that person who came up with that idea, the idea itself implies the existence of odd and even numbers,
Hypothetically.
hypothetically. But the point is that it's completely independent of
The person.
us.
Yeah.
And even cooler is that this stuff that can exist in this third world, like these ideas, it can actually have a causal impact on the other two. So World War II would not have happened unless someone had, except for the fact that someone came up with the idea of countries.
Or that there's a World War One.
Right, exactly right.
Unless
But the
someone's just
point
like,
is,
part 2 is the beginning. It's like, why would you
yes,
do
but the point is that the very existence of the idea of countries and the fact that that idea had become physically instantiated in the world contributed to what happened in the physical world.
that? Yeah, absolutely.
So Popper like he made these really powerful arguments, which is that the older conception, which is just you have the world out there and then you have the world in here, he's like, that's just totally wrong, because you do have those two, but arguably the most important world is the third kind.
Yeah.
Because what's with the stuff that exists in the third kind has actually transformed the planet completely. Most, so like 99% of the stuff that happens on this planet happens because of the stuff that exists in the third world.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, obviously, it depends on how you describe it, because it's like, there's your physical self, I think. There's like your physical world.
But like the world one is like the world of like what exists out there in reality, and then world two is kind of your subjective experiences that exist goes on in here, but like world three, so he conceives of knowledge as this objective thing.
But wouldn't World 3 exist part of World 1 because that's the reality itself?
No, like as in, this is what I mean, it's like as in, okay.
Oh, World 1 is the physical manifestation.
Kind of, yeah,
Gotcha.
yes, kind of, yeah.
And then World 3 is like the abstract.
Well, like for this one might fucking blow your mind, I don't know, but like COVID is world 3. The genetic material, the information that is in the genes of COVID, that is world 3.
But it's also World 1 because it's physically manifesting.
It is physically manifested, but it is independent of that physical manifestation. Which is why.
Because when you're saying COVID, you're speaking of the abstraction.
I'm speaking of, well, the abstract information.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like and like there's all kinds of crazy shit you can say here, right? So another crazy thing you could say is, somewhere out there in the universe is a comet, right?
Okay.
Or a meteor, and it is coming towards Earth. There's somewhere out there in the universe, it's coming towards us, right? Now it might not get here for like 1 billion years or 10 billion years, but the point is that it's hypothetically there could be a comet out there and it's on its way here, right? The only thing that is going to stop that comet hypothetically from hitting Earth and destroying everything is knowledge, is this objective shit that exists in the third world. It is that stuff that will turn our planet into one of the possibly only ones in the universe that actively turns away comets, as opposed to attracting them.
Yeah, this gravity. I know I can phrase this, but because you're giving an example, I know I can phrase like that rule. It's like, it's like Sudoku. It's the whole deduction thing. It's in order to combat, for lack of better words, combat this hypothetical comet. You need to combat it with in order to combat a hypothetical problem. You need to
Yeah,
do it with a hypothetical solution.
yeah, yeah.
And
But
and
it's
if
like,
it's real, if the problem is real, then the way to beat it is with that real solution.
yeah, 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 yeah. Like it's when you think about it this way, right? And when you think about the existence of this stuff, this stuff that we call objective knowledge or whatever you want to call it, or ideas or whatever,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you actually, and this is a conclusion that Popper started to reach, and then Deutsch really formalized it. The process of evolution, the process of Darwinism, and all this stuff. What's actually happening there is just the emergence of this objective
Yes,
third world stuff,
yes.
and this third world stuff has for billions of years basically been in cosmic battle with the world one to kind of just free itself, and not free itself but improve itself.
It emergence itself is a process.
Yes, like, and what's essentially happened in the last 500 years is humans, because we're very, very special kinds of creatures, have taken the process that was going on with evolution, and we have come up with a way of doing that way faster.
Yeah, I think it's because we became more and more aware. That plays a
Yeah,
factor.
like we can go into all of that at some other point. Like,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
essentially the thing that makes humans able to do this way faster is that our ideas can die in our place.
Yeah,
Where
and Jordan's mentioned
yes,
something like that too.
yes, this is what I'm saying. Jordan really, he's so close.
He's like, just read
So,
this book, Jordan.
yeah, so close in so many ways. It's so frustrating, but
And this
it's
is
like,
cool. I mean, 'cause obviously, I'm not the only one. I'm not special. But this whole idea, because I get what you're saying now, and I'm understanding Deutsch's terminology of hypothetical criticism. That was like part of my patterns. It's just like, if this is all, if this, you have these 4 points, and there's a certain relationship. I don't know if it's like concentric circles or layered. I'm trying to
yeah,
understand that fundamental relationship between like this category of abstraction, longevity, functionality. But my approach to move forward is, well, just truth is also consistent. And
yeah,
the maybe another way to say it, the flip of the coin is it lacks contradiction. And
yes,
so it's crazy that Deutsch is just like, oh, sweet, I've been thinking about this. It just feels really
yes,
good.
yes. Like this is the amazing thing about viewing things this way is you realize things like that the theory of evolution is not a theory of biology at all. It's a
It,
theory of information.
it's
That's
bigger
what it
than
is.
that.
Yeah, it's deeper. It's
It's
way
deeper.
deeper.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I
Um,
think Jordan looks at religion and stuff like that. That's why Brett
yes,
Weinstein, when he spoke to Richard Dawkins, he was trying to convey that religion or the external phenotypes
these
are
extended
also
phenotypes.
are
We
also
we can talk
Darwinian.
about that. Yeah, so we can talk about that some other point if you want, because that was an interesting conversation. Brett um seemed very like he's, you see, the people like Brett and Jordan, they're putting their noses on something. There is the when you think of the way to think about it is that um this there is some of this knowledge, some of this special kind of information is encoded in these stories. It
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that it's of the kind that is very hard to describe with language,
Yeah, and
in
it's been
words.
articulating, emerging,
Yes,
throughout time.
yes, yes. The one of the big mistakes though that Jordan makes is that he thinks that this stuff is really certainly true. It's been around for so long that it's just fucking hell, man. What's most permanent is most true, you know. And he and like that's a mistake. That's a big mistake.
That you think Jordan thinks what is true.
So this stuff that's in these stories, and it's like really hard to describe in words, and there's like these it's there's some really
Like the
really hard
archetypes. Kind of.
yes there's
Yeah,
like,
hopefully he doesn't think this is true. Hopefully he thinks this is the most true thing. And then there is this third world thing that's
well,
trying to emerge out of the archetypes.
the thing about unfortunately though, I think, and I know I sound very maybe a bit arrogant saying this, especially to describe Brett, who is an evolutionary biologist, is that both of them have wrong ideas about how evolution works and what's going on there.
Ooh.
Like Brett was saying things in that conversation with Dawkins that I find it very hard to believe he actually agrees with. And I think it was just the pressure of the event, and he's in front of a live audience, and he's speaking with Richard Dawkins and shit. And I think he just said that because some of the stuff he said made no sense. Like at one point, he tried to describe a beaver dam as both a replicator and a phenotype. He literally said, he was like, it's both. And like Dawkins' response after that was just like, you don't really believe that. And he wasn't trying to be condescending. He was trying to basically go, you are an evolutionary biologist. Everything you've said up to this point has been reasonable, and what you just said there is just, it makes no sense. Like,
Interesting.
So there was parts of that conversation where I think Brett, under the pressure and stuff, like was very confused.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's anyway. We can talk about that
Another
at some other
time.
point. I really do need to go.
Yeah,
but that
definitely.
video would actually be a good one, I think, to go over because it's very interesting. It was a really cool talk.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I'm really glad we had this talk. Just this whole immersion thing. It's what I've been trying to focus on and like hone in on and figure out.
Yeah, emergence is fucking. It's like evolution itself is an emergent process. Like evolution does not consist of atoms. It's a process that like that I don't know gets layered on top of atoms.
Yeah, yeah. Completely
really
agree.
cool. It's really cool. All right. Anyway, see you, man. That was good talk. Way longer than I was really intending. All right. Let's see you.
Cheers.
Bye.